we wouldn't invite those people to listen in on our conversations with our wife. Why would we allow them to do it through the use of digital technologies?
Yeah. So let's talk about digital ID, digital currencies. These are a couple things that are part of the conversation now. I know in the US by May, there's a drive to require digital real ID to get on planes. A lot of people don't know if you just use your passport, you can still get through that line. You don't have to have this real ID. Again, the argument will be, this is convenient. What's wrong with this? This is good. It just makes everything smoother to have my health records on my ID and so on and so forth. So why should we resist that?
Right. So the digital ID eventually will be tied to your face scan, your iris scan, your fingerprint, this biometric identification. It will be used for more and more transactions, not just going through TSA at the airport, but for all kinds of ordinary things that we do. And so it's tracking and gathering data on you all the time. It's also going to be tied into financial information, private health related information, all kinds of things that can be used as carrots and sticks to control your behavior.
Yeah.
Once digital IDs are tied up and bound up with central bank digital currencies, which is another thing that we should talk about. Basically, you have a system of total surveillance and total control through means of basically financial control that the totalitarian systems of the 20th century couldn't even dream of having. So let me flesh this out for you a little bit. In a cashless society where there's no decentralized cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, which can be a good thing for fostering human freedom, all the currencies that you're using are going to be a digital dollar, right? Or a digital yuan, or centrally controlled currencies. Basically, what you have in your digital wallet does not function like real money. The government gives you, let's say the government gives you a tax refund, a child tax credit, $2,000 in your account because you have kids. Great, that sounds awesome. You have a digital dollar in your digital wallet. That can be programmed in particular ways to nudge and control your financial behavior. So there could be provisions saying you have to spend this in the next 9 months. You can't give it to your kids. You can't donate it to THINQ or churches that are bigoted. You can't save it and put it into retirement. We want to stimulate the economy with this. So you got to spend it. Oh, and by the way, you have to spend it on green energy related products or corporate approved products that have good ESG scores, or vendors that have the right kind of social credit score, right? So you already see the nudges. Furthermore, we can program this digital dollar, if you don't spend it in 9 months, to decrease in value by 10% every month that you don't spend it until, 20 months later, it disappears. So what you realize is this is not actually money. This is not the same as $2,000 cash that I might be able to spend that would augment my financial freedom and that I can spend any which way I want, and that the government can't monitor and tax and know every one of my financial transactions to build a profile on me to say, well, this is a person who supports these causes that the people in power don't approve of, and therefore they need to be targeted for some form of exclusion or persecution. And with this level of control, again, if you don't fall in line, they can turn off your ability to engage in financial transactions, which is a method of totalizing control over people's behavior. I mean, if you can't buy gas, if you can't buy food.
Which, didn't we see that in Canada? I mean, wasn't there a moment where truckers weren't able to access accounts?
That's right.
A lot of this digital control came into place during that COVID crisis where people were protesting, and literally because they were protesting, they weren't able to access money.
This is not science fiction. The debanking, the government mandated under the Emergencies Act in Canada, which had never been invoked before, and the Supreme Court of Canada now says it should not have been invoked under those circumstances, didn't meet the legal criteria, but never mind, they did it anyway. Yet not only forcibly removed with a militarized police force the truckers from Ottawa, but shut down not only their bank accounts, but the bank accounts of people who donated money to support them. Right. So imagine giving $50 to the truckers and then going to the ATM the next day and you can't get into your checking account because the government and the private banks didn't approve of what you did with your money. Yeah. So this is not science fiction. We've seen it in action already.
Well, I think where people get overwhelmed is, well, what do we do? I mean, we live in this world where they're moving this direction to not access the $2,000 child credit means I'm leaving that on the table.
Sure, yeah.
To use the system means I'm starting to feed the system.
Yeah.
Catherine Austin Fitts is somebody I like to listen to how she thinks about this as an economist. And she always promotes creating friction. She's like, anywhere you go, you create friction so the system can't fully get into play. That means use cash everywhere you can use cash.
Yeah.
Force people to be at that register when you show up to check out. Don't just get into the digital scanning. I try to do that. It's so inconvenient. I'll wait in line behind a basket full of tons of food. I'm just buying a couple things. But I do it because I want to not participate in the system. I want to create friction.
And some places won't accept cash anymore. And so maybe you don't patronize those
and let them know that.
anymore.
Let them know. I mean, you've got to communicate this because ultimately the economy and the money is what will drive people to make decisions.
I think Fitz is right. It doesn't take a majority to push back against this stuff. It takes a strong and determined minority. 8, 10, 12% of people opt out of the TSA screening, which we can still legally do. We don't have to do the Face ID. By the way, they're not taking your picture. They're scanning your face in order to identify you on any CCTV around the world. If 10% of Americans opt out of that system, say, no, I'm not going to do it, when it comes time to think about mandating it, they're going to realize, okay, there'll be a small but vocal minority, including maybe a handful of influential people who will make noise about not being able to travel. We don't want to deal with that. We're not going to force it on people. So I totally agree. Create friction. Creative, determined minorities can throw a wrench in this and get away from the myth of inevitability. That's right. This is something this is an ideological tool that is used to basically make people passive and convince people that they are, in fact, not free and we have no control over our fate or our destiny. And this is the idea that technology moves automatically. This is coming. There's nothing you can do to stop it. Yeah. And so you might as well just be passive and supine and roll over and take it. That is an excellent way to control people and to create a passive population. Yeah. Human beings, our ideas, our decisions do shape the direction of history, right? Of course, we believe that as Christians, that we can cooperate in God's providence by our own free decisions, and we can bring good into the world or we can bring evil into the world based on our own choices. And so we have to be firmly convinced that, in fact, nothing is inevitable. Some things look very likely, some things will be hard to stop, but we need to maintain the conviction that we are free at an individual level, and those individual decisions collectively do have social consequences.
And your story completely maps out on that timeline. I mean, as we were discussing earlier, I want to talk about artificial intelligence because now with artificial intelligence being a part of this new dynamic of the biomedical state of using biometrics, we now have machines making these decisions. It's not always humans that are sitting there deciding. Like if you try to go, for example, you're in an airport and you're in Orlando and you've got to go through that, that scan in where you take your boarding pass out, you scan. There's no human there. If it just says you're not getting in for whatever reason, your records. We don't like that you're sick right now because we measured that you have 100-degree fever. Whatever it might be, you can't appeal to a human. Yeah. There's nobody there. Like you're dealing with a machine. So as we get into this future with AI, are you concerned about where AI is going to move with this? And what are some of our ways to try to create friction even in an environment where artificial intelligence is designed to remove all friction?
Yeah, I am concerned about AI. AI can be a very powerful tool. I do use it. I have used ChatGPT and Grok and the large language model AI. There's useful things that these things can do to aggregate information, to synthesize complex information. If the algorithms are functioning in a balanced way, and if they're drawing on good information, that can be powerful and useful, as any human tool might be. I think a helpful distinction for Christians, for any thoughtful people, in fact, is the distinction between a tool and an idol. And if you look at a biblical understanding of an idol, a false god, let's say the Old Testament is rife with these stories, right, of people taking something that is the work of our own hands, which might be a useful artifact or piece of art or tool, and elevating it above us and looking to it for answers, making it into an oracle or a place that we go for guidance. That is very dangerous. Then the work of our hands basically becomes a false god, and that comes back to bite us and puts us under the sway of principalities and powers that do not have our best interest in mind. And I see that danger with AI. So as a physician, sometimes I have patients querying a ChatGPT, what are the risks and benefits of this antidepressant medication? And again, if it's drawing on good information, that might yield some well-synthesized information to inform a patient about a medical decision. That worries me less than when I have a patient saying, hey, ChatGPT, given my medical history, should I take this medication, right? Rather than consulting a physician that knows them at a personal level,
right,
that can have the back and forth and the kind of nuance and the human decision-making process, which involves subtleties that an algorithm is never going to achieve. So looking to these things for answers on how to live, for wisdom to guide our free choices, that strikes me as a very dangerous trend that already in this early stage of AI, I'm already seeing evidence that people are treating this not just as a tool, but as a kind of oracle, idol, repository of wisdom,
right,
which strikes me as dangerous, certainly like unbiblical.
Yeah, well, it's religious in its own way. And I know there is a religion that's many in this space are following called transhumanism. We won't have time to